All right. So the topic for today is how to build business acumen as a product manager. We've been talking to a lot of product leaders over the last little bit, and it's one thing that pops up over and over again. It's like, how do I get my product team to think more like product leadership? How do I get my product team to build better business cases? De-risk the bets that we are taking and really figure out, okay, what's going to drive the right KPIs for the company. It's a topic that comes up over and over again, and a lot of the product managers that we talk to as well are interested in this topic because they're looking to move into leadership positions, and it's such a critical component from moving from product manager to maybe a product director or VP product. So that's the topic that we'll cover today. I'm Dan. I'm the head of go-to-market at Savio. Been working in SaaS, on different parts of go-to-market in SaaS for 12 years. Have done really, really early stage startups where we had to figure things out from the ground up, and done some scale ups and an IPO as well. I'm joined by Kareem here, who's the co-founder of Savio. He's been in product management for 20 years, been doing a lot of startups, had multiple successful exits, has a lot of battle scars to share today around like how he built business acumen, being a founder and having to lead product and business at the same time, and how that was kind of like a very fast boot camp of ramping up the business acumen side of product. So what we'll cover today is why did product management kind of lose its way a little bit during the 2020 boom. There's a bunch of stuff that happened that changed the function of product management. How do we get product management back on track as a revenue driving function? We'll go through a simple framework for boosting your business acumen as a product manager, and we'll also cover how to use customer feedback and data to make better product decisions. So let's dive right into this. So the core job of product is to take raw inputs and turn that into profits. That is really the core job of product. So taking feedback, taking ideas, taking dev cycles, development costs, and really figuring out how do you best optimize the resources that you have that's going to drive the most amount of revenue, the most amount of margins, the most amount of profit. But there are things that happened over the last few years that kind of made us lose our way, in a sense, when it comes to this function of product. And in some companies, a lot of product teams have actually lost their credibility with, the go-to-market side and the engineering side of the house, and they need to start building it back. So let's go through kind of what happened and why we're in this state right now. So in 2020, interest rates were near zero. There was lots of investment capital deployed at pretty much every single stage of company. There were seed stage SaaS companies that were getting $20 million rounds. There were Series B, C, D that were getting a lot of funding. The economy was great. Demand was high for everything. Basically, companies were looking for any kind of slight edges that they could get, and they were buying up every single tool possible to give them that slight edge. Now, with that free flow in capital, companies were really growing at all costs. There were companies that were spending $20,000 to buy one customer, right? And they kept doing that. I know of sales leaders and marketing leaders that would pay people $200 to join a demo call. It didn't matter if it was qualified or not. They were just putting that money out. Like that was the state of the economy in 2020 and how business was run for a lot of SaaS companies, because there was just so much funding that was available. So the focus was acquire as much as possible. Didn't matter how much it costs. We will gain profit later on. Let's acquire as much as possible. And with this, in order to keep up with the demand, companies had to hire a lot of people. Everything scaled up, right? We had to hire a lot of people, and a lot of companies had bloated engineering teams, right? You just keep hiring devs to keep up with the demand. Now, within this time, product was generally an under-resourced function, right? So you have these growing engineering teams, you have these growing sales and marketing teams. That's where most of the cash went, so that you could acquire more, you could ship more. But product was still kind of under-resourced. And with the growing engineering teams, you basically had to get to a point where you're just feeding the beast. You can't have idle engineering time. You can't have devs that are just sitting there doing nothing. So product management became very much about feeding that beast. Kareem, what you kind of operated like Savio all throughout this time. Like, what have you seen during this time?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of the conversations were really sort of struck that tone, which is because of the gearing, the ratio of product management to devs. You might have one PM for 5, 10, 15, 20 devs. And as anybody who's been, on the line dev, line PM seat knows, you can't have your dev team grinding to a halt. I sort of think about it like a coal shoveler in an old fashioned locomotive. That's the PM. You just got to shovel the specs to the devs to make sure that the locomotive keeps running, to mix metaphors. And so, it becomes very apparent when devs are sitting on their hands and the culprit is product. So there's a lot of pressure on product as the dev team scales, and the ratio grows more favorable for the devs to keep shipping features. And you sort of have less time to step back and think about, are these the right features? Are these the things we should be shipping in order to grow the business? You need to keep your company's investment in the dev team, going, because it becomes very apparent that if you don't do that, it's your responsibility. So it was, it was good times, but it was also tough times for people wearing the product management hat.
Yeah. So with feeding the beast, there's a bunch of problems that come with that. Like Kareem said, you're basically writing specs. You're making sure that the engineers are busy. You're managing timelines more than anything else, right? You don't want idle time. So it's like write in the next spec, write in the next one, make sure that the production line works. And there was very little time left to figure out, okay, what do customers actually need? What's customer feedback like, right? What are we hearing? What are the gaps in the market? If I'm weighing 10 different features, which one is going to drive the most amount of revenue, or maybe drive the most amount of retention? Because there was artificial demand and revenue kept increasing anyways, a lot of these fundamental tasks to product management just kind of went to the wayside a little bit. It used to be when you start a company, and Kareem, you have plenty of examples for this, and I've done a bunch of bootstrap startups as well. It used to be that when you start a company, you focus on building commercially viable stuff. And commercially viable stuff means that you are selling the product, and then you are building the features that are required to fulfill the deal, and then you are taking that to go sell more deals that kind of look like that. And that's how a lot of founders start their companies, right? It's very much, if you don't have funding, if you don't have unlimited funding, you very much have to self-fund through revenue. So a lot of times, and this happens a lot outside of SaaS, this is how you build a company. But in SaaS, a lot of times when you first get started as a founder, that's how you operate. Then you start growing and you're still kind of operating in this way. And then a lot of companies at a certain point, they'll get a certain amount of traction. And because of this, they'll get a significant amount of funding. And as soon as they get that amount of funding, this behavior of sell, bill, sell kind of goes away, right? It kind of becomes build and maybe we'll sell it. And that causes a lot of kind of a downward spiral for a lot of companies, where it's like in 2020, this behavior changed quite a bit going into 2021 because the demand was so high. You were basically going out and building anything, right? This happened at a lot of companies. You were going out and building anything. If it was marginally cool, then okay, let's go out and build this. Let's ship it, build it, ship it. And when when you have the funds to do it, you can go in and just build, and hopefully things catch up over time. Um, But with very little time spent on customer research and understanding customer feedback and weighing your options and trying to figure out, okay, what's going to move the needle the most, these decisions around what to build were highly influenced by executive teams and engineering teams. And as a product manager, you just kind of have to keep up, right? And that's kind of a theme that was reoccurring through 2020 and 2021. You just kind of have to keep up. You can't have, like, dev velocity was the main metric for R&D, and you can't have dev velocity go down. So if sales are just going to happen, the demand's artificially high, then just feed the beast, continue feeding the beast. And so product management.
I'll just say,
Yep.
Dan, that, like, for what it's worth, that incentive structure makes sense for product to just keep shoveling the coal, keep feeding the beast, because if sales are just going to come in, you want to make sure that you look busy and that your dev team is busy and you're doing the best you can, right? You're building the features you think make sense, given the amount of time you have to do customer research or product discovery. It makes sense that that's the sort of role that one falls into, is just feeding the beast, because things are going well, right? It was, when I say it was good times, it was good times. The company was growing, and we as humans have a tendency to believe that when I do something and something good happens afterwards, that good thing happened because of the thing that I did, which may have been true, but may not have been true. May have just been macro conditions that contributed to companies growing and growing. And so that, sort of getting to the sort of juice here is really around, growing one's business acumen and well, we'll get to the good stuff shortly. I think Dan's still going to frame this up a little bit more.
Yeah. So what you're saying around, that did it grow because of kind of the macro conditions, or did we grow because, we're prioritizing the right things? It was hard to figure out during that time because, again, demand is so high, right? You're feeding the beast. So product management for a while kind of became project management because that's really all you had time to do. And that happened for a period. Before the 2020 boom, product management was a lot about trying to prioritize the things that are going to contribute to revenue growth for a company. And now that we are back in 2024, and like the economy is kind of like flat and all that stuff, and we've been in this state of like almost negative demand for the last couple of years, we have to go back to becoming product managers, and we have to move away from just project management and just feeding the beast. And it's become very, very important, and it's become very obvious after the fact. Now, like, hindsight is 2020, right? But it's become very obvious after the fact, now that things have settled down, how companies were operating. And this was happening, like, we're focused on the product management org today because this is a product management webinar. But this happened in every single org, right? Engineering teams became bloated, sales teams became bloated, marketing was just like buying leads because they had free cash. And then everything became hard in 2022, mid 2022 going to 2023, still hard for a lot of companies in 2024. And this is where we're realizing, okay, the things that we were doing during that time, the results were artificially high because of the macro conditions. And there are things that we decided to like cut corners on just to keep up. And now we have to go back and retrain and unlearn the things that we were doing during that time and start moving back towards, okay, what is the core job of the product manager, which is taking raw inputs and turn that into profits. So we'll get into the framework. We'll go into different pieces of it, how to think about tying product decisions to the broader business. And that's really what we're trying to say with business acumen, is trying to figure out how do you connect the dot between what you are doing today, the features that you're deciding to prioritize or deprioritize, and what's the impact that has on the broader business, and connecting the dots, because that is really what product leadership does. The executive teams, they all run meetings the same way. I've been on a few executive teams and I've been at a lot of companies. You can go ask your executives to show you the Excel spreadsheet they use to run meetings. Every executive team has it. That is the main thing that starts every conversation and every decision, like whether you're using OKRs or maybe just strategic objectives or, EOS, or, you're using some other planning um, method to make decisions for the company. Every single thing anchors into that one spreadsheet that they look at on a daily basis. And the more you understand about that spreadsheet and the conversations that are happening at that level, the better business acumen that you can build. So, Kareem, I'm going to hand this over to you now to start going through the framework, and let's dive in.
Yeah, for sure. So quick story before we dive in. The second summer job I had as a CS student during university was a co-op term. Was with a company called Backweb Technology. So my boss there was named Bill, and Bill was VP of product management. I had no idea what product management was. I was a dev. And they had me, ironically, this is 1998. I don't even know how many years ago that is. Dan, can you do the math on that? He had me build a feature request tracking tool for his sales team, because the problem was acute then, and it's still acute today, where product was getting anecdotes from sales, and CS wasn't really a function then. But any customer-facing folks about features that they wanted product to build, and product had no way of keeping track of it. And so Bill gave me advice before I went back to school in September. He said, what do you want to do with your career? And I said, I think I want to start a software company one day. He said, the advice that I would give you, and Bill had graduated from Harvard Business School, was a very smart guy, very bright, very persistent. He said, the advice I would give you would be go work in every function inside of a company. Go work in sales, go work in marketing, go work in support, go work in ops, figure out how a company works. But the two things you're going to need to know how to do are to sell and to make product, which you know how to do, and sell product. And that was a lesson that I didn't acutely learn. Like, that was sort of the learning from the wisdom of others, which I sort of ignored. And then when I started my first company, I was like, oh, I understand what Bill meant. And then when I started the second company, I didn't start. Dan had the sell, build, sell slide up earlier. And so we didn't write code until we had built wireframes and pre-sold people on the idea of the product with those wireframes. So that was really like the beginning of the sort of scaling up my business acumen, was actually having to go sell myself. And that's hard, because when you're not in product, when you are in product and you're not in sales, you don't often have to sell. You might come in, you might be a few pre-sales conversations, and there are often post-sales conversations with customers, but you don't actually have to necessarily think in terms of what does this person need in order for the deal to close, and you don't have to think about that sort of relentlessly like folks in sales do. So let's dig in here more into this framework. So really, like, what this is about, and this is sort of how Dan framed things up, is taking the raw inputs that you have at hand as a product manager or product leader, and helping turn those into profit for your company. And so profit is really the expected financial gain, or the realized financial gain, minus how much it costs you to make the product, so your COGS, cost of goods sold, and then how much it costs you to sell the product as well. These are just some light definitions before we move into the real juice. And so, in terms of gain, like, how are you actually going to make revenue from this thing? In SaaS, you have sales revenue, so closing new business, or expansion revenue, or you have retention revenue, so preventing churn. And then you also have operational improvements that can give you increased margins on the money that you're spending.
Yeah. One thing on the operational stuff, because this one is not always as obvious. Like, when you tie something to increase in revenue or increase in retention, like, that's kind of a direct line. But there are things, depending on what kind of company that you're working at and what the strategic objectives are. Like, the last company I was at, we had an entire team that was servicing, basically doing website updates for all of our customers, because we didn't have a self-serve like portal for them to go in, for our customers to go into and make their own website updates. We were managing investor websites for them. And one of the major strategic initiative was, okay, if we do certain things in our product, then they can go and schedule some updates, and we have people on our side that are going to QA the updates before they go live, because it was very important with financial data. It would actually reduce our human hours on that specific task by 90%. And that's like a massive amount of margin, right? And that became a big piece in terms of like, we could have gone and built, some features to try to increase sales revenue, but because we're a publicly traded company and revenue was flat, another way for us to deliver shareholder value was making sure that there was profit. We became profitable, and that alone like got us like significantly closer to profit like months earlier than we expected. So those are the types of things in terms of like improved margins. Like there are things that maybe you can do and prioritize in the product that helps alleviate some organizational debt or burden in such a significant way that it makes the company more profitable.
Yeah, one of the sort of things I hear about on the regular are reduce like AWS's pricing is quite opaque, and so reducing your AWS bill is almost always doable. Whenever I've looked at an AWS bill for our company or from clients who I consulted with in the past, very often you could squeeze out a few points of margin just by spinning down servers or databases or other services that were not used but still being paid for. So you got your gain on one side, and then you've got your cost. And so the way we think about cost is you've got the cost for your fully loaded dev team. Each dev salary times number of devs, and then you've got your cost to maintain and cost to build. Cost to sell. So your dev cycles are how much it costs to build. You've got your cost to maintain built in there, and then you've also got your cost to sell. And some of these are like, I get it. Like it's often hard to estimate the impact of the gain and the costs. And so what we recommend doing are sending out doing back of the envelope calculations on both the costs and on the expected revenue. I'm going to drop. Actually, I won't drop it in here because the chat is not working, but I will perhaps send it out. There's a great presentation by a guy named Dan McKinley called Data Driven Products Now, and his the web address is datadriven.club. It'll take you right to the deck. But he talks about his time at Etsy, where they had how they evaluated product ideas by doing back of the envelope calculations, just to sketch out like, could we imagine a world where this is going to be a profitable feature or not? And so he walks through a couple of concrete examples, and they're super helpful to just sort of get your head around it. But when you can back of the envelope your expected gain and your expected costs, again, back of the envelope, it can really be a good heuristic for helping you prioritize the potential features that you're considering building. So simple framework here. This is a framework we use at Savio, and it's a framework I think that can help you guys as well when you're prioritizing. So just ask yourself the question: is this a win rate feature, a net revenue retention feature, or a margin feature? So this isn't like ICE or other frameworks. This is really a business acumen, a business focused framework, and you'd sort of be surprised how often features that people build won't help gain more business, retain business, or squeeze out margin. So when you put your features through this lens and justify them through this lens, it really gives you a way to take your big long list of features and boil it down to a much shorter list of features that you can then stack rank and prioritize. So like when we have our founder level, executive level conversations at Savio, these are the kinds of questions we're asking in order to boil our big list down to a small list. And I'll be candid about one thing we're talking about right now is AI, right? Everybody's talking about AI. How does it impact things? And so AI is a good example of probably all three of these things. It'll help us win more deals. It'll help us retain and expand accounts. And AI will cost more than our current state of affairs, but we can also charge more for fancy AI features down the road. So this is, that's sort of when a feature hits the trifecta, it's something that you should pay attention to. Never mind the fact that AI is reshaping, how business is done and even how lives are lived these days. So the folks who have the PMs who I've run into who have good business acumen are folks who are either founders turned PM. They come from a revenue side of the house, so from sales or CS, and that's just sort of baked into the way that they've done things. Or they've really, thought hard about putting the features that they're considering building through this lens. This is a couple of ways to upskill. So this becomes like a regular way of sort of thinking for you when you're thinking about prioritizing. So one is, and Dan mentioned this, like see if you can get a look at the spreadsheets or discussion notes that your executive team is having around the business, because they don't think in terms of issues and epics and specs. They think in terms of new business closed and revenue retention rates. So that's one. The next is to study financial statements and study the decisions that are made based on those financial statements. And a nice entree into that are Warren Buffett's shareholder letters. So they're super, super accessible, but he very much focuses on the numbers. Like they're highly entertaining to read. One quote that one line from one of his reports that I'll always remember is he invested in a company called NetJets, which is fractional jet sharing. So if you have a lot of money and you want to fly private but don't want the cost of having your own private jet, you can basically like buy into NetJets, and you'll be guaranteed a certain number of hours per month or per year, whatever. And he's talking about the experience of flying NetJets, and what he wrote was NetJets makes the thought of flying commercial feel like going back to holding hands again. So and this is in shareholder letters, and I was like, I've probably read that 20 years ago, and it still jumps out at me as like a great writing, right? Because he got his point across in what is usually a very stodgy and dry medium, but he really made it entertaining. So read his shareholder letters, take a look at some of the financial statements for his companies. He's very transparent about how his company's performance is doing.
I'll add something there too, Kareem. If ever you have a chance to work at a publicly traded company, it might or might not be a fit for you. Like I worked for just over 2 years at a publicly traded company. I didn't enjoy the work or anything. Like I left that world to go back to startups and tech startups. However, you think about the company very differently than if you were at a VC backed startup or even a bootstrap startup, because you have these quarterly reports that come out, to your point of around like Warren Buffett's shareholder letter. If you're a publicly traded company, you have to do these financial reports, and it's such a good way to learn that business acumen. Like join the earnings calls. You can join earnings calls for pretty much any publicly traded company out there, and you will see like how they talk about the company, how they talk about the value, like how they spin it, like all of that stuff. And a lot of times, like I was at a publicly traded company at the end of 2021 when everything came to a peak, and then going into 2022 when everything started going down, and we continued to increase our share price every quarter. Even though our revenue flatlined, we started losing customers, and it ended up because we were making bets around improving margins and all that stuff, and it just made me think completely differently around like, okay, if the end goal for a company is generating profit, there's a lot of different ways that you can get there, right? There's a lot of different ways, and it just really opened up my mind around making those connections in a way that I hadn't really thought about before, because at the smaller startups, it's always about driving more sales revenue. Right. But there's a lot of different ways to create value for the company. And those financial statements or those earnings calls are like really, really good for like just boosting your business acumen.
Totally. One other simple exercise that I do here is when I run across a business that I think is interesting, like there's an ice cream stand a few blocks away from me, and they're seasonal. So they're open, I don't know, May till October, call it. And they sell, ice cream for, I don't know, $5 a pop, but they got sundaes, they got add-ons, etc. is just do some back of the envelope math. Like, you know, they sell, I don't know, 60 ice creams an hour, and the average selling price is, I don't know, call it $6. Let's, $360, and they're open from whatever to whatever. They're open 10 hours a day. So that's how much they make. And then what's their rent, and what's their cost of labor? What's their cost of goods sold? Just that's kind of um, just a good mental exercise to get into to build your business acumen, just get into the mindset of being a business owner, which is really like how you're going to start, how asking yourself these questions is going to become like second nature to you. So instead of it being weird and uncommon, you'll just start thinking like this, because your head will be in this notion of like, I need to figure out how to make a dollar. And that's what an exec thinks about. That's what a product leader thinks about at the CPO or VP product level. And so those are good just exercises to get into doing, to get your brain in that sort of way of thinking. So next slide, Dan. One of the reasons we started Savio is to be able to do this. And so Savio helps you understand how much your feature quests are worth with respect to retaining revenue or winning new deals as well. And it does that by pulling in data from your CRM. It helps your GTM teams log feedback directly to Savio, so that you can then link that feedback to feature quests, and then finally filter those feature quests by CRM data. So you can see the total opportunity revenue associated with a feature. You can sort by active customer revenue. You can hone in on features that are ideal for your ICP. And so if you want to book a demo, Dan, what's the best way for folks to book a demo?
Go to our website, www.savio.io, and hit the book a demo button.
Perfect. So Q&A, if you have Q&A, feel free to drop it into the Q&A tab there. We've got a bunch of time, which I usually like. This is my favorite time of the webinar. There's always some great questions and good discussion here.
All right, we'll let the questions come in. One thing that I want to ask you, because I hear this a lot from product people, is like, if I'm looking at features in terms of win rates, retention, that kind of stuff, do I risk becoming a feature factory for the go-to-market team? Like, that's the first thing that comes to mind when I talk about, sales revenue or retention revenue in terms of features. I usually get that question from product managers.
Yeah, I mean, to me, a feature factory is somebody who doesn't, or is a team that doesn't really think about their order takers from sales or order takers from CS. Sales says build this, and product says sure. I don't think with more data, I think you actually have a better case, especially more revenue data. You have a better case to make for building the features that you think make sense as a product team. So I actually think it puts you in a stronger position, because you have more evidence on which to build your product planning, your prioritization decisions. So, I sort of don't really like, on one hand, like, every team is a feature factory. Like, they're building widgets, and those widgets just happen to be features. But I think the sort of derogatory notion of a feature factory is like, product has been so beaten down by the GTM side of the house that they just, sales says build this and product says okay. But I think the truth is that when you have evidence and data to help you make a case for building this and not that as a product team, you're the opposite of a feature factory. You have autonomy and sort of control over the product direction, and you have evidence to use to make that case.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always the flip side of this too, where it's like, I've seen product teams index way too heavy on the other side, where they're avoiding being like a feature factory so much for sales and CS that they don't necessarily listen to their inputs and feedback. And that also has its negative consequences, because then you are building based on your gut or the engineering team's gut, instead of, what the customer facing folks are hearing in the market. So there's a balance there. We have a couple questions here. How did you identify the right industries and areas to be competitive when starting your own companies? Could you describe the process you followed to navigate that?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the person to follow. I'll tell you what we did with Savio. So Savio is the fourth company that I've started. Um, Savio was born of a need. So I've been PMing software products for 20 plus years, and I always felt like I was falling behind, or not falling behind, but not taking into account all the feedback. I'd hear about things from GTM and dribs and drabs, anecdotes, water cooler, and then Slack. Sort of those kinds of situations. I never felt like I had my arms around the feedback, and I certainly didn't have any kind of revenue information around it. Like, who's asking for this? Not all feedback is created equal. Um, and so we that was sort of the inkling of the idea. We had a couple of other ideas as well, but that was really driven by personal pain. And we went out and talked to 2014, 2015, went out and talked to 30 PMs, and they all said, no, I've already got this problem solved. It's all good. And I think there's sort of this notion of like having conviction in your idea and having a vision. And we sort of accepted that. We bought another business, we grew it and sold it. And then when we sold it, we came back to this idea, and we still said, when you ran the last business, did we have a good solution for this? No, we didn't. And we went out and talked to a bunch of PMs, and it's still not clear to me what changed, but the PMs we talked to that second round, which was probably 2018, I want to say, most people had the pain. They were like, yeah, I don't really have a good solution. And it is becoming more important for me to actually, have this. So that was sort of how we picked. And then, or how we picked, and what we did was we went out and talked to as many PMs as we could. So by hook or by crook, through referral, through cold outreach on LinkedIn, we made a microsite that spotlighted PM resources, and we had an email list associated with that. And so when people joined the list, we would then reach out to them to talk to them about how they tracked feedback. From there, we went to the wireframe stage, where we build wireframes for V1. We did some technical feasibility. So we built some of the trickier technical pieces. We weren't sure whether they could be done, and we figured out how to do them. And from there, we went back to the PMs with the wireframes and said, hey, we're going to build this. Would you be interested in basically paying for it when it's live? And I have a friend who, we didn't take money up front, but I have a friend who does often do that, and I've done that in the past as well. We say, look, this is going to be $99 a month. If you pay me 50 today, you'll get 50 for life. And if I don't build this in 3 months, you'll get your money back. And so that, the best signal as to whether you have something that's worth paying for is whether people actually pay for it when it's vaporware, right? This is sort of the sell, build, sell approach that Dan mentioned as well. So it looks like that's from Mike Manning. Mike, I don't know if this is the Mike Manning that I'm buddies with from back in the day in LA. If so, hello, good to see you again. And yeah, if you have a follow up on that, feel free to follow up.
Yeah, I've worked at a number of early stage startups too, Michael, and the way to like figure out the competitive space is like really to try to identify the void in the market. There's so much that already exists, and this is like over the last 3 or 4 years, it's been harder and harder to build a commercially viable product. And this is what we're kind of talking about today. It's like it's not enough to be able to build the features. You have to be able to sell the features as well. And it's becoming harder and harder for companies to do that because there's just so many options out there. We had a webinar a few weeks ago, and we went through this. It was about how to create or how to prioritize features for controllable churn, and we went through just in MarTech alone. In 2012, there was like 350 options for marketing teams to choose from. In 2024, there's over 11,000 options, and those are the known ones. Like there's brand new ones that are coming up every day that are just too small to even make those types of lists. So the thing that you really have to isolate on is like, what is the void in the market? It's very easy to create slightly better copycats, but the problem with slightly better copycats is that they're incredibly difficult to sell because the costs for somebody to change like their workflows, change vendors and stuff is just too much for like the marginal gain that they get. So it has to be like a pretty big void in the market for it to be commercially viable these days.
Yeah, it's tough just to identify like how to be competitive. I mean, the key questions I ask are, walk me through how you're solving problem X today, and how's that working out for you? And very often, you'll hear like what's not working for you, what could be better. And if you're talking to what I call sort of smart, users or customers, they will tell you like they'll be introspective enough to say, well, broadly it works, but these three areas really suck and are painful. And if you hear that enough times from people and feel like you have a good solution for it, and it's, to Dan's point, it's not just a marginal gain, it has to be worth the cost of switching. Then that gives you some signal as to how you might differentiate from your existing players. But I will also say, like, it feels to me today in a market where that's so saturated in pretty much every segment that the one way to stand out is to a very powerful way to stand out is to have a brand around solving the problem and educating prospects on the problem that you solve. And so, it's a way to stand out. It's a way to get known. It's a way to build relationships with people. And it's not so much about the product. It's more about the sort of distribution and the brand. There's a reason Coke is still the number one soft drink, right? It's not because sugar water that's brown is particularly interesting or unique. There's lots of options out there. It's because of the brand that they've established over the last 100+ years.
Yeah, product is a very core function of go-to-market. Like I know when we talk about go-to-market teams, we often reference sales, marketing, CS, and when we're talking about product teams, we're talking about devs and product managers. But the product management function, there used to be a time that you needed an MBA in order to be a product manager because it's such a core function for the rest of the business. It makes sales easier, it makes marketing easier, it makes retention easier, all that stuff. So that is like the nut of it is like, can you sell the thing that you're going to build? And if yes, then that's a good way to assess the competition. We have another question here. How do you carve out the time to conduct this data analysis when you're under tremendous pressure from the go-to-market side to churn out new features?
It's a great question. It's the reason we started Savio. Have a good tool to do it for you is really the short answer, right? You can spend a lot of time on Google Sheets or Airtable or Trello or ClickUp or whatever. But when you've got a tool that has opinions on what the things are that you should be looking for and the kinds of analysis that you should be doing, it's going to make your job substantially better by saving you a ton of time. So I don't know if anonymous attendee who submitted this question, I don't know if you're a customer, but if you are, feel free to hit me up, k@savio.io. We've actually got a new reporting feature that's in beta right now and feature flagged, and I can turn that on for your account. That'll give you a bunch of insight into things like what are the top trending feature requests by features by requests over time, what are the top trending feature requests by revenue over time, who are the internal folks who are submitting feature requests, so like which teams are on board with this, which teams are not, a bunch of other sorts of insights that'll help speed up the way you do things. But really, it's have a better tool is the answer. I could tell you to work nights and weekends, but I wouldn't do that because I think that's nuts.
Especially as added another comment saying not a customer, just a burnt out PM. You do not want to work nights and weekends. The other thing I will say, and like I've worked in sales my entire career, a big piece of you being able to do this is participation from sales. And if your sales team is asking for features, but they're not giving you the supporting evidence to do it or not making it easy for you to actually collect it, then they have to make some changes as well. It can't just be product goes and finds all this information. Like if sales wants better features from you, or, at the end of the day, like they're saying they want more features. Like I've run bunch of sales teams and my reps are all like, oh, I need this feature, I need this feature. Really is they want the ability to make it easier for the customer to buy. That's really what they're asking for so that they can get more deals through. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. And sometimes the features matter, sometimes the features really don't matter. But I've had reps that were putting a lot of pressure on product, and at me as the sales leader, I told them to back off because they were just putting on unnecessary pressure. And then I also had reps who were collecting really valuable information, packaging it in a way that made sense for product. And I actually had somebody on my revenue operations team build this function in Salesforce. This was long before I knew about Savio. But we were building some sort of mechanism in Salesforce so that our go-to-market team had a place to store this, send this, all that stuff. It was a lot to maintain. So like knowing what I know now about Savio, I would have just bought Savio for the team. But at the time, we needed some stuff from product. Like that is just a reality of running a business, right? You have to make it easy to buy, you have to make it easy to retain. Some stuff that sales and CS can do to make that better in terms of process and how they run sales cycles, some of it is going to be impacted by product. There's no way around that. But me and the head of customer success, we were very adamant with our teams around like, if you're going to make an ask, you are going to give all the relevant information in the way that is usable for a product for them to make sense of this. Because it's not fair for you as a product manager either to just get the ask, but not getting all of the stuff that you need to make the ask, to build the case around the ask. If they're not giving you that information, then they have a role that they need to play in that as well. Sometimes a revenue ops team can help you. Sometimes that's a leadership thing, right? The sales leader of a CS leader needs to help you out and say like, hey, I can deliver more features, or I can deliver more of the right features for your teams to make it easier to sell. However, I need this information from your team. Can you help me? And we work together on this. So there is a role from the go-to-market team, and you're burnout, and they have to like play ball with you as well, because it's not fair otherwise.
I feel for you, anonymous attendee who's a burned out PM. I've been there. It's definitely a drag.
All right. Any more questions? I have a couple minutes left. Kareem, what was the biggest aha moment in your career so far that you feel contributed the most to your business acumen as a PM?
Ooh, that's a great question, man. Biggest aha moment. So I was working for ESPN.com back in the day. We rebuilt their fantasy football system. It was kind of a death march project, which is like poorly spec'd, bad product leadership. And so we just kind of threw up all the sort of upgrade pages in app. So it was free to play. You could upgrade to get live scoring. So on, I don't know if you know about fantasy football, but on Sunday, when the games happen, you draft your team, and live scoring basically would show you like how your team is. When you watch a guy score a touchdown on TV, you'd then see his points accrue right on your ESPN fantasy football page on Sunday. Otherwise, you have to wait until Monday when all the games were done. So in the app, we had a page that talked about upgrading. It was the upgrade page. So you'd set up your league, you'd sign up for your team, and then you'd hit a page that asked you to upgrade. It was $100 a year. And so before we launched, we went and did a usability test where the whole team is behind the one-way glass, and you've got a participant and a moderator on a computer watching. They're going through the participants going through the setup process. The moderator is sort of guiding the session, and the team is behind the one-way glass watching what the participant does to learn about the experience the participant is having. So there are 8 participants, and 6 of the 8 got to that upgrade page, which we had just kind of thrown up there. And it said something like, upgrade today, live scoring, $99 a year, some other like useless bullets. And 6 of the 8 said, well, I'm pretty sure I upgraded last year. I paid for fantasy football last year. I'm not really sure what live scoring is, and $99 a year. Like, is that recurring? Is that one time? Do I have to like, will I keep paying next year? And they all had a bunch of questions about it, but it basically boiled down to like, I don't know what I'm getting if I'm not going to pay. Or sorry, I don't know if I'm getting if I pay, so I'm not going to pay. And so that for me was an aha moment. I was like, oh, like there's a buyer on the other end of this, CTA page or landing page, upgrade page, and they need to understand what it is that they're paying for. And I'm not thinking about that right now. I'm just thinking about getting the project out the door and making it a great experience in app. But in order for the in-app experience to be experienced, especially the pay parts, which are going to drive the business, people need to understand what they're getting. And in order to click the button, enter the card info, and pay. And so that was, I don't know, 2003, 2004, something like that. And that was the real, like, because I had transitioned from dev to product. I was super junior on the product side. And that was a real aha moment for me, where it's like not just about building a great product, it's about building the business. And
Mhm.
one way to build the business is to understand what the customer experience is, what customers need, what the gaps are, and their understanding of what you're offering, so you can address the objections, fill the gaps, help them understand what they're getting, and then give them a way to pay you for that. So that was
That's very
yeah,
interesting.
pretty formative 20 years ago or
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
I feel like I've met a lot of folks with that probably had that same realization. It's like you built it so you understand what it is, but can you communicate it in a way that they perceive the value, or they're like, "Oh, I have these problems. Those problems go away if I pay $99. Cool, I will get this." So it's not just enough to build a feature, but also how do you explain it, in what context, where does it add value, and to
Yeah,
whom?
it totally, and it's a real skill, right? Like it's a to me, that's a product marketing function,
Yep.
or marketing function, and that we didn't have one of those people on board on the team, and so you then had devs turn junior PMs who threw up crappy copy, and and conversion was a lot lower than it should have been. So yeah.
Cool. All right. I don't think we have any other questions unless somebody pops one up right now. Three, two, one. No. All right. We'll leave it at that. We'll send out the recording to everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I will make sure that I have the chat working next time, so that we can have a bit more dialogue back and forth throughout the webinar. But appreciate you guys all joining today, and have a good one.
Thanks so much.
All right.
See you later.